Hello everyone, it's Justin, and today I'm so excited to be sharing with you this cute little Thanksgiving card that I created using some products by scrapbook.com. I am going to be mainly featuring the Cozy Autumn rub-on transfers and the Turkey Time shape dies, and those are the main products that I'll be using today to create this card. I'm also breaking out a handful of different pattern papers as well using the Harvest Smooth cardstock. I'm grabbing 4 different colors from this pack: light and dark brown, a light green, and a straw yellow color. I'm also grabbing the Playful Smooth cardstock as well, and I'm just going to be using the black from this pack, and the black's just going to be used for the dark parts of the eyes. And finally, I'm using the Spooky Pattern Paper collection, and from that collection, I'm using 3 different patterns: a yellow, orange, and a orange-white gingham. Now I'm starting by trimming down the light green paper from the Harvest Smooth cardstock to 4¼ by 5½. Next, I'm grabbing the Mum stencil by scrapbook.com, and I'm going to go ahead and tack this down with some 1-inch mint tape to hold it in place. Next, I'm going to use one of the blending brushes to blend up some Distress ink in the Vintage Photo color. I know I'm moving kind of fast because I sped up the video, but I just kind of take my time when I'm ink blending, so I wanted to not waste your time and just speed up the video a little bit. So after I'm done, I do a nice little peel reveal, and then I use some antique brass that I spritz onto the table, dilute with a little bit of water. I go ahead and I pick it up with a paintbrush, and I go ahead and splatter it onto my card. As you can see, I am using my hand to go ahead and block those splatters from getting anywhere towards my papers and my die cuts, and that just helps keep everything nice and clean. I love that I'm going to get some fun metallic shimmers from this when everything is nice and dry. Next, let's go ahead and work on the Turkey Time die cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the packaging, and after everything is nice and removed, I'm going to go ahead and begin die cutting all the little pieces. As you can see, I've got a handful going through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine in black, and I'm just using all of those little paper colors that I chose from earlier in my project. I'm also using some white paper for the whites of the eyes, and now I can start to work on the panels inside of my card. I go ahead and I grab my Cozy Autumn rub-on transfers, and I'm using the second sheet of this because there's a really cute sentiment towards the bottom that says Happy Thanksgiving. All I have to do is use my scissors to go ahead and trim this sentiment, and then I want to go ahead and get it nice and trimmed so I'm not using any of the other images that are included with this rub-on. I'm grabbing the nested arch dies, and I'm going to go ahead and size these to make sure that I'm using the closest sized arch tag that will work with that Happy Thanksgiving rub-on. So I go ahead with my yellow paper and I go ahead and put an arch tag on it. I also grab a gold from the holographic metallic cardstock, and I die cut that with the arch tag that's slightly larger than the yellow paper from the Spooky Pattern Paper collection. I go ahead and I get those die cut, and now I can begin the process of distressing the edges of my yellow panel with Vintage Photo Distress ink. This is just going to add a nice discoloration to the edge of the panel, giving it a finished edge in that Vintage Photo color, and it's also going to pull in that color from the Mum stencil work that we did earlier in this video. Now I do like to go in and just distress each of the sides of the die cut to get that nice distressed edge using the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Next, I smush my ink pad down and I spritz it with a little bit of water. I go ahead and use a watercolor brush and splatter that watered down Vintage Photo Distress ink onto my arch panel. This adds a fun speckled effect to my project. Next, I take my Happy Thanksgiving sentiment from the Cozy Autumn rub-on transfers and I put it into place on the bottom of my arch tag. Don't worry, all of the ink is nice and dry. I use the little popsicle stick that's included with the rub-on transfers, and I go ahead and I press it into my rub-on images. This is a little bit of a tedious process just because you want to make sure that every single part of the rub-on is pressed down using that popsicle stick tool that's included with the rub-on transfers itself. I kind of go ahead, I take my time to get this done, and I keep carefully lifting up the edge, making sure that everything is transferred over. However, if you notice that a little piece of the rub-on is still on the plastic acetate, all you have to do is press it back down onto the paper, use the popsicle stick to rub it down, and then just continue to carefully remove. It'll look just as good if you do it this way, so no sweat if you've got little bits. There's also some little leaves that are included with the Cozy Autumn rub-on transfers, and I thought that these would be fun to add to my project just for a little background embellishment. So I go ahead, I take my leaves and my flowers, and I start to put them into place one at a time. I do press them down with the popsicle stick tool that's included, and this one I do end up slightly ripping on accident, but it's okay because you can actually layer these rub-ons. So I go ahead, I take this little red leaf that's included, and I put it into place so it covers up the portion of the rub-on that I missed. This is a great little hack to know in case you make any sort of embellishment issues with your project, and you can just go ahead and quickly correct them by layering a rub-on on top of it. I go ahead and I use a large red maple leaf, putting it in the top right portion of my arch panel, and I go ahead, I press it down with my rub-on tool, and I'm going to go ahead and remove that plastic acetate. One thing is, some of these are going to get covered up when I put my turkey image later on in my project, and that's a-okay. You can kind of peek the detail around the edge, and I just like that they're there for that extra detail. I continue my process of layering the leaf rub-ons using the Cozy Autumn rub-on transfers with the included mini popsicle stick tool. I'm using the little leaf and the little flower for embellishment in my upper left portion of my card panel because I know that these are going to be a little bit more visible as my turkey is going to be a little bit more down on the panel. So I know that some of these images will peek out over the turkey feathers nicely. Lastly, I'm going to use some of the orange leaves that are included. So I've gone ahead, I've used the small little orange leaf. It's a smaller version of the leaf that's used in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this orange maple leaf on the left portion of my card, kind of left of center. I'm going to use my rub-on transfer tool. I'm also going to have a little bit of an issue here where I do nick my paper a little bit after I pull up the acetate, but I was rest assured with this one because I knew that my turkey image would cover that nicely and I wouldn't have to worry about it peeking through. Using my Artis liquid adhesive, I go ahead and I glue my panel down to my slightly larger gold metallic panel, and this gives a very nice metallic gold frame to my leafy panel. I go ahead and I just get a little bit of the glue buffed off, and I use that Artis glue once again to adhere my panel to my Mum ink blended background. These colors all work so nicely to get all of those autumn feels going for this Thanksgiving card. I just love how that gold metallic paper pops against that green and brown background that we did for the ink blending earlier in this project. Once I have everything all nice and pressed into place, it's time to begin the process of putting my die cuts for my turkey together. I use the Vintage Photo Distress ink to go ahead and ink blend the different edges of my die cut. I use my Artis liquid adhesive to go ahead and adhere the bits onto the brown matte portion for my turkey. For my turkey die cut, you can also use that matte. Feel free to use it with some vellum, as that'll give a nice clear-ish edge to it opposed to some darker cardstock like I'm doing. However, what I love about this background piece for the turkey is it acts as a wonderful guide to putting all of these little pieces into place. It particularly comes into help when it's these little turkey legs and making sure that all of the bits and bobs of my panel will be ready to go. I love ink blending the edges of my little die cuts because it really adds some nice dimension to them, makes them pop off the panel, and makes my image not look so flat. Of course, with saying adding dimension, that's more so what I mean, but it really amps up the turkey and it's something that I call a nice finished edge. Now I do ink blend all of the brown bits. This is the head that we're ink blending right now, and I'm adhering them to my image one at a time just so I can keep track of everything. Now moves on to a little bit more of a tedious portion where I am adhering the different facial features of the turkey to the image. I'm using my Precision Tips tweezers to go ahead and get these items into place, starting with the little yellow beak and then moving on to the two eyes. But keep in mind with the eyes, there is the large white portion of the eye, and then I will be adhering the little black pupils as well. You can barely see those little black pupils floating in my craft organizing tray, but rest assured they will be adhered nicely to my project. One thing that I very heavily recommend with using small little elements like this, actually, we'll say two things. I recommend using a tip tweezer just so you're getting all of those little bits and bobs exactly where you need to go because they're going to be kind of small to handle with your fingertips. The other thing that I recommend is using minimal amounts of adhesive because they're such little pieces of paper. They will work if you just use little bitty dips and dab of that adhesive. So as you can see, I've got my little turkey all ready to go. I use an acrylic block to press down all my bits, and then I grab some large square foam adhesive bits to put onto the back of my turkey, and this will allow him to pop once I place him onto my card. It's funny to watch me put all of these little foam squares on because it looks like I go a little off the walls with putting all of these foam bits on, but I like to make sure that I put enough foam on the back of my image that it supports the image nicely when put onto my card. I remove the backing of all of my foam squares just so I make sure it gets a really nice stick to my card front. I'm checking carefully to make sure I've got all of them ready to go. And then once all of my backing pieces are nice and removed, I go ahead and I begin the process of sticking my little turkey to my card, making sure that he's nice and centered. Using some Artis liquid adhesive, I go ahead and I put some adhesive onto an A2 card base, and then once that's ready to go, I take my main panel of my project and adhere it to my card base. I thought I was done, but after I put everything into place, I realized that my panel could use a little extra glitz. So I go ahead, I reach into my stash, and I do end up pulling out some gold glossy dots by Pink and Main, and I put a handful of them onto my project just to add a little bit more of a metallic embellishment. I do end up slightly changing the placement of these dots off camera, but I still go ahead and I use them to make my card nice and finished. If you're not fully committed to the placement of your dots, I recommend not fully pressing them down onto your panel because you can always move them around if they haven't been firmly pressed down. Once I have all of my gold glossy dots into place, my card is fully completed and ready for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you all so very much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. Be sure to take a moment to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the crafty inspiration I have to share here on my channel. Once again, thank you guys for stopping by today and have a great day. Goodbye.